Good evening, friends, and welcome to the series of webinars what we were arranging earlier. Now we have a different one this time, that is something relating to ERM, which is more towards behavior and less towards checklist, because there are things which are invisible. You have to actually conclude basis. So many things you have to look at and then gather the assurance, and it's a difficult topic. And for that, today we have Shreyas Petkar, who is the leader of Pune region at PwC. He is leading risk assurance function over here, and he is equally dedicating his time for development of new generation of internal auditors and risk specialists. So he's looking after training and development aspect at PwC as well. Has got a good amount of experience in the risk assurance, internal audits, and related assignments. And today he is going to share his experiences on ERM. So the structure of the program is, uh, after Shreyas is done with his presentation, we'll have Q&A, and after that we have a quick online poll which will be displayed by Minas, and all of you are requested to participate in that survey poll, and then we'll conclude this session. So welcome to all of you again, and over to you, Shreyas.
Thank you, Nikhil. I hope I'm audible to everybody. Am I clear?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah. So I'll also share my screen before I start. Just let me know if it is visible.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, great. So thank you for the warm welcome, Nikhil. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here speaking to all of you today. It's always great to be amongst professional colleagues and get to share experiences. So thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. Before I start discussing the topic, just a few disclosures. One, obviously, all the views that I'm expressing today are my personal views and not really of the organization that I work for. And secondly, there will be certain terminologies, certain references to certain concepts. I do not own any, rights to any of those. Those are rightfully, of the people who have written or thought of those concepts and the organizations who have developed those. I'm only using them in general parlance, as we all do in our day-to-day conversations around this topic. With that said, let's just kind of give a brief moment really to understand what are we really going to discuss over here today. So all of us on the group today over here are risk professionals. Some of us are on the consulting side of it. Some of us work in the governance area within organizations as a part of the internal risk teams of various organizations. But I think ERM as a concept is nothing new to anybody today on this forum. So we will not be really discussing nitty-gritties of what ERM means and how to really go about conducting an ERM assignment. What we will be discussing is what are those common mistakes, if we may call so, that we see happening around ERM. Now, ERM, as we all know, is a difficult topic. Nikhil, you rightly mentioned it is complex. It is not really something which is very straightforward. There are multiple aspects, multiple angles that one has to consider when we are working on ERM engagements. And that actually is the reason why we see that a lot of organizations do not derive the desired value out of the ERM engagements that they work on. They do spend a lot of time and effort, but eventually it kind of becomes more of a theoretical exercise, and management really eventually fails to see how it is really adding any value, and why should they even continue investing in this particular project. And that's just not in India, but globally that is a very commonly felt sort of sentiment. We also see that ERM as a concept itself is not very thoroughly developed uniformly across all the sectors. There are certain sectors who have adopted ERM very well and have kind of really absorbed it into their day-to-day working. So industries such as banking and financial sector, there you see that risk management is quite inherent to the way they work. On the other hand, brick and mortar industries, while risk management obviously is a daily job of almost everybody, as a concept, ERM doesn't seem to have been absorbed that very well across the spectrum. Large listed entities, obviously do have the necessary resources. They have spent that money, but amongst the listed entities themselves, you don't see similar rigor across. And then today we will kind of try to see, what are the kind of reasons why, sometimes this does not succeed the way we would like it to. What I have done for the purpose of today's discussion, I mean, the slides that I'm going to run are nothing very flowery or complicated. These are very simple slides that I have created. We are directly going to jump into what are the common pitfalls that we see. While there could be several, pitfalls that we can discuss, I have tried to kind of, crunch them into, maybe top 6 or 7 major areas of, ineffectiveness that I have kind of come across normally. You will also see that they are not in any particular order that I'm going to discuss. It is not that something is more prevalent than the other. They are randomly placed in this presentation. And as we go along, you will also see that there are quite a lot of interdependencies among these reasons, right? These feed off and into one another. So they are not necessarily standalone as well. So with that, I'll quickly move into the main topic. So one of the first and most common pitfall which I see is basically treating ERM as a compliance activity. Come board meetings 15 days in advance, people will start scurrying around, pick up the last quarter's presentation, generally see if everything is, pretty much aligned. You will see that either one or two small tweaks here and there are done. Pretty much the status quo continues, and that, to my mind, is probably the biggest risk, that ERM is really not being given the value it deserves in the overall, governance structure. It is a very, very critical process within the 3 lines of defense of any organization. But we often see that people treat it only as a tick in the box, as a compliance activity, and thereby fail to really derive any sort of value out of it. Uh, Also, what happens is people focus a lot on ERM as a process in itself, and not really what one is expected to achieve out of ERM. And what I mean by that is, you will see a lot of elaborate processes around, risk identification, risk, assessment. There'll be scorecards, and there'll be all sorts of jing bang around the whole ERM process. But ERM, at the end of the day, is what ERM does. The focus should be more on what were the risks, what were the mitigation plans identified, what were the key risk indicators, how many of those risks, emanated in a particular period. We don't see a lot of focus on that. The board presentation kind of gets finished off in, say, half an hour or something of that sort, right? So the overall time and effort that one spends on this is something which is a very common pitfall. I think one has to keep in mind that ERM at the end of the day is an enabler. It is not an end in itself, right? Having an ERM is not something, which is going to do anything. Yes, the SEBI requires us to have an ERM. It's good governance to have an ERM, but there is more to it. Organizations should look at ERM not as an activity, but as a means to something more, relevant. What does COSO really say ERM is? COSO guidelines basically just say that ERM is nothing but it's something which helps organizations reach where they want to reach, and helps them avoid any sort of a pitfall or surprise on the way to that particular objective, right? So I think most of the organizations really, in the enthusiasm, fail to really see that this is an ongoing process. One has to keep on evaluating risks throughout, the year. It has to be embedded in your day-to-day processes, and that's I think, in my mind, the first, common pitfall which I have come across. The next one, equally important, is, in my view, the insufficient tone at the top. Uh, I was tempted to say absent tone at the top, but that is not really a fair statement to make. I think insufficient, again, it kind of feeds from the earlier statement that we made. It is, if it is being treated as a compliance activity, obviously it just gets looked upon 2 days, 3 days before a board meeting. It is really not given the necessary priority and the focus. Now, first and foremost, we have to understand that ERM is a strategic initiative in an organization. It is not an audit. It is not an internal audit. It is not something which is a day-to-day activity. It is a strategic project, strategic activity which deserves the right kind of focus and effort from the board and executive management. Now, also there are many things which only the leadership can really speak about. For example, what does risk mean for an organization? Now, who else but the board or the executive management should be defining this? What is a risk appetite for a particular organization? What are those go no go decisions that the company can take? Now, I think this is where it's very important that the board signs up to this with entire heart and soul. They have to recognize that they are the ones to drive the risk culture in the organization. And risk culture, I think, is a very important word over here. Risk means obviously the potential that something may go wrong or something may come in between you and your objectives, but it is also something which might stop you from achieving your full potential as well. So risk is a much broader spectrum. It is very important that risk as a concept is understood uniformly in the organization. What the board thinks is a risk versus what the executive team or the grassroots level execution staff thinks as risk should be aligned. It has to be in the same direction. Only then can we really achieve real value out of ERM. I can maybe cite you, one or two examples which which I have personally come across. So typically, cyber security as a risk is something which is very critical, gets spoken of very often, in every ERM project. Now, when we speak to say the CTO or the board, I think they are generally very comfortable about all the programs that they are running. They have service providers giving them various kinds of assurances, and they do have various policies, procedures, everything put in place. But in one case where we actually went and interviewed some junior staff in a particular location of the organization, they had not they were not even aware that there is something called as a cyber security policy in the company. Now, if that is the kind of gap that one sees, how are we really seeing that the risks are being adequately dealt with? Because risks are not going to actualize necessarily only at the board level. Every person who transacts on a day-to-day basis in an organization can potentially trigger a risk event. And risks do not differentiate between senior management, mid management, and junior staff. Risk does not differentiate between who's a top performer, who's a poor performer. It is not that only poor performers in the organization will create problems. Risks can emanate anywhere, right? And I think this is where it's very important that the board really gets involved. Communication again is very important. Now, what I mean by communication over here, do you see that beyond the initial kickoff sort of communication, what communication happens from the executive managements to the larger teams around ERM? We rarely see any sort of conversation or any sort of communication happening over there. Many times, people are not even aware that certain activities they are doing are as a part of the ERM project or are going to impact the larger ERM project of the organization. So, board has to first and foremost maintain the ownership. They have to absolutely give it the necessary priority and focus. And secondly, they also have to make sure that on an ongoing basis, they are reaching out to various stakeholders of risk in the organization to reiterate the criticality of this particular project. Inadequate knowledge and training. Now, I think we can speak on this one topic for probably a very long time. Uh, you know, uh, Typically ERM projects, are not necessarily only done, by outsourcing this work. Many organizations do carry out ERM engagements in house. But one thing which I have personally seen, is that the concept of ERM, while broadly is understood well, not everybody understands the methodology around ERM very well. So there's always this risk where organizations are reinventing their wheel. They're trying to create their own kind of methodologies around ERM, how they will go about it. Again, typically people who deal with concepts of internal audit risk are to a great extent comfortable with all these methodologies and terminologies, but not all participants are also at the same level. Typically people from the operational side, you would have your production heads, you would have your operations heads. They are not at the same level when it's, say, if you compare them with, say, somebody like a CFO or a company secretary, right? So within the participant group itself, I normally see that understanding is not quite uniform. There are several concepts which can be very very confusing for people. For example, I have like seen myself explaining the concept of inherent and residual risk, something very very basic to an ERM engagement, so many times to people. Still it is not something which is easy for people to really understand, because naturally when you are thinking of a particular risk, it is very difficult to think of what would this risk be if I take away all the existing controls out of the picture. We normally take a holistic view of the risk given what controls we already are aware of. So it's very very difficult for somebody to understand. Another concept which I've seen is not very easy is something like, say, a risk appetite or a risk tolerance. Now, again, seemingly very similar terms, but a risk tolerance is something that an organization can take. A risk appetite is something which the organization would like to take. So there's a very subtle difference over here. So these terms also can't be used interchangeably. Now, as risk owners, as participants of an ERM framework, if the people are not very clear of what these various terminologies are, there's no way they are going to effectively participate in this particular process. Their inputs are important and they need to understand this very well. Now also, because people are not very conversant with a lot of things, we also see inconsistent practices being followed. Sometimes in one quarter you look at risk appetite in a particular way, so in sometimes in other quarter the whole concept kind of undergoes a lot of change. People very easily kind of mix and match things. So again, uniformity of the practice is also very very important to make sure that you are talking the same language throughout a particular period. On the other side of the story, I have also seen organizations where ERM gets overcomplicated. It really gets into so much nitty gritty of everything that frankly one wonders when is it that we are really going to come to the actual activity of monitoring the mitigation and the actual risk impacts. So we have also seen that sometimes in the enthusiasm to implementing an ERM framework, people go extremely theoretical as well. Another common thing, inaccuracies in assigning risk rating. Now I think that's also a very very pertinent issue which I've seen all the time. People don't understand how to really assign ratings. What so when I say an impact, or what is the probability or what is the velocity of a risk, this group might feel what is so complicated in this, because we are maybe internal auditors, governance risk professionals. It's second nature for us. But somebody who is not conversant with this, it's very very difficult. I have seen the outputs of ERM going waste. We've had to do multiple sessions. There have been times when I have personally had to sit with people to kind of help them fill in those ratings, because it's kind of very difficult for people not from this background to understand this. Now, what does this really mean for us? So I think for me, I think it's very important that for any ERM project, there is adequate time, you know, devoted to knowledge and knowledge transfer and training, be it as an internal service provider or an external service provider of ERM. We have to provide adequate trainings. Adequate workshops need to be conducted throughout the course of the engagement, so that these concepts are reinforced. People are again and again reminded of what is expected out of them. Creating FAQs is very very helpful. You have your ERM policy documents, but they generally are quite at a high level. They do not necessarily help every time. So in my view, I think our FAQ has been very helpful. uh, talking, again and again, being approachable, being reachable to participants of ERM programs is crucial. Giving them that comfort that, listen, we are there to help you, we'll make sure that you don't do anything wrong, is something which has to be done. And once the first round of ERM has been completed, it's very important also to make sure that the handover of the project is also done very well, because at the end of the day, the management has to run ERM is a management function, not an audit or a governance function. In that sense, as external service providers or internal service providers, we cannot be running ERM for them, right? So over there, the knowledge transfer again is very, very important. So we need to really focus on how we can create those materials, e-learns, or whichever tools you may want to use, but to make sure that this is transferred very well, so that people can successfully run it after you have exited the project, is very important. Next is ERM org structure, or a risk management org structure, or enabling infrastructure to support ERM. Like in the very first slide, we had discussed that ERM, if you treat as a compliance, it ends up being a 3-4 day job where typically somebody like a CFO or a chief risk officer will sit with the registrar. They'll start articulating any critical events of the last quarter. They'll fill in the mitigation plans, and then it pretty much ends at that, right? I think organizations really need to understand that ERM, while it is actually a board function, it has to be embedded in the organization all throughout. It has to be in every process. There are elements of ERM which have to come into play. So it is very crucial to make sure that the ERM org structure is very, very well identified. In my experience, the ERM policy typically talks of the risk committee which is there. It maybe highlights 6-7 risk owners, or as many there would be in an organization. But beyond that, there isn't really much. Roles, responsibilities are not very clearly articulated. Risk owners typically are going to be very senior members in the organization who will report into the board, but are they the ones who are responsible for executing activities? Clearly not. They are accountable for it, right? So who will support into them, who will kind of work on their behalf, what sort of org structure they will create for the ERM, is generally not given necessary focus. Similarly, I have seen around data, right? I think ERM is extremely data heavy, extremely data heavy. It is not about just, group of people coming together, sitting and deciding what are those 8-10 risks. You have to make use of data within the organizations. Now, what are these data sources in the organization which are going to feed into your ERM program? I haven't seen in whatever last 10-15 years that I have been working on this field, I haven't seen any organization which has a very clearly documented repository of data sources, reports that will feed into an ERM project. I think that's also something which leads to, again, inconsistencies. There isn't a lot of demonstrability of a particular assertion in your ERM presentation. What are you saying? Why are you saying? Where is this information coming from? Again, I think that's an area where most of the organizations today are not focusing so much. And lastly, I think technology is extremely crucial, yet something which is not high priority when you speak of ERM. The moment you speak of ERM, the first thing that comes in people's mind is everybody coming into a room and sitting and chit chatting. You cannot leave technology for later. I have often said that, okay, we will do this ERM once it settles, whatever that means. Once the program settles, then we will invest in technology for this. No, that's not really a great strategy. I think technology should be a crucial part of your initial framework setup itself. And only then an ERM program will become sustainable. It will become easy on the people, and also it will aid genuine decision making for the board. Now, coming to what sort of risks typically get identified. Now, here I'm sure all of you will have a million examples to talk of. Generally, it so happens that people focus on process issues rather than genuine strategic risks. I think first and foremost, we need to understand, or we need to make the organizations we are working with understand that ERM is basically focusing on risks which threaten achievement of your organizational objectives, and more importantly are life threatening to the organization itself, which can jeopardize the existence of the company. Unfortunately, what normally happens is there's always this bottom up approach to risk identification which comes into play. Now, is it wrong entirely? No, it is not wrong entirely. But is it the best approach? No, definitely it is not. Why? Because simply put, you end up talking of very, very, mundane day-to-day process level risks that clutters your entire risk register. You have way too many minor risks which really have no bearing on the overall strategy of the organization. It doesn't really have any impact on the existence of the organization, and you end up spending so much time on that, right? So it is always good to have either a top-down approach where you start with the organizational objectives, organizational strategy, and then come down to the associated processes, and if at all there are any critical risks over there, or maybe a hybrid sort of a risk identification methodology, if at all. But clearly, bottoms up is not the best approach. If any organization you see is doing that, I think you should really counter that absolutely and guide them to a better way of risk identification. I have also seen, risk identification is more instinct driven in companies rather than based on facts and data. And instinct could be anything. Instinct could be something as simple as, like I had mentioned, that something has not happened in the past. Okay, this has never happened to us, or no, we are very good at something. We have fantastic systems and processes. It can never happen to us. It's an instinct. It's a gut feeling. But that doesn't really mean anything when it comes to actual risk emanating. There are concepts like confirmation bias. Like you already have a very very strong belief that something is going to go wrong, so you basically only look out for those indicators and you focus only on that just to prove that yes, this is what I feel, and yes, this data proves that. Group polarization. Now, group polarization meaning what? I say, for example, I'm a very I'm a very very strong believer that cybersecurity is a very very critical risk. Now, as a part of the exercise, 15 of us gather in one room. Everybody is very very passionate about cybersecurity. We discuss it, and at the end of the day, go back thinking that cybersecurity is much bigger a risk than we originally even thought it was. As a group, we sit together and really make something much bigger out of a particular issue, right? So all these are human tendencies, behaviors which drive risk identification. Risk identification is a complicated process. ERM is not a perfect science, and therefore all the more important to have a very strong methodology behind it. And I think for all of us, COSO has already done a fantastic job around this. I think if that is followed, I don't think anybody really needs to worry much about anything. But still, we do see that people do fall back on a lot of their thoughts rather than methodologies for risk identification. I also spoke briefly of this, but I think one major element which I have seen missing is threats to and from the strategy. And what do I mean by that? So obviously, threat to a company strategy is very very straightforward. It's quite well understood. I don't think that's an issue. But many organizations forget to address risks emanating from the strategy that they are going to implement. So, for example, digitization is something which is a buzzword these days. Every company is on a massive digitization drive. But have they considered what are the threats which will emanate out of digitization? Are they a part of my risk identification? Generally not. Generally, organizations keep it for once the strategy has been implemented, then it would probably start showing some sort of signs of some risk, and then probably they'll think of it. But that's not the best strategy. You should always look at, if I have a particular strategy, are there any risks which are going to come out of it? For example, if I'm going in for digitization, there could be data privacy threats, there could be cyber security threats, very particularly for the tools and technologies I'm implementing. Who are the various stakeholders who will have access to this? Are there any risks coming from there? So these are the things which I have seen are not generally getting considered. And lastly, like I said, tracking and reporting too many risks. Now, uh, in fact, I have seen even at board level, there are times when people look at, okay, we have these top 20 risks and top 25 risks. There is no denying that these risks are there, right? They risks are definitely there, but are they something which needs to be discussed at the board level? Is something which we really have to think through. Now, if there are 20 such top risks which people feel deserve to be reported to the board, I would really worry for that company a lot. Something major is either happening or about to happen in that company. Because normally, I think a top 10, top 12 should be sufficient, should be covering all the critical risks. Anything apart from that, not that it is left to God's mercy, there are other mechanisms in the organization to keep on monitoring it. There are other assurance providers, there are internal auditors, there are many ways in which you can monitor and review risks. But does everything have to go under the umbrella of ERM to the board? Definitely not. And I've seen many companies, make that mistake as well. Next is around the risk statements and responses. Now, I think vague risk statements is something which I have, very often come across. Now, when I say vague, they are not necessarily Hail Mary statements all the time. It's just that a risk statement has to be made very relevant for that particular organization. What does a particular risk mean in the context of a particular organization, right? Let's take an example of, say, environmental risk. Now, environmental risk is applicable to almost every organization today, but what does it mean for an IT company versus what it means for a banking company or what it means for a manufacturing company is very, very different. Within manufacturing itself, depending on which sector you are in, the risk would mean something else altogether. So when these risks are getting defined, often I see that people keep them very generic, very open, but that's necessarily not the best way to go about it. I think it has to be made very relevant from the context of the organization. This really helps in, one, I think, articulating risk indicators very well. If you do not define risk well, there's no way you're going to be able to monitor the risk very well. And if you're not going to be able to monitor it, then how are you going to even control it well, right? So I think bringing in more tightness in the way the risk statements are defined, the way your risk tolerances are defined, the way your risk indicators are defined, the way your risk responses are documented, I think is very, very, very crucial. Risk responses, again, just because the risk is a slightly more macro kind of a risk, uh, doesn't mean that the risk response also has to be equally macro. I think they have to be very specific as to what the organization is going to do. There has to be some sort of a timeline and accountability for that particular risk. Now, also, many times we see that there is a bit of a hesitance in becoming a risk owner in itself. I have seen many times, when we go to a particular person, say, sir, you have been, or ma'am, you have been identified as a risk owner for this particular risk. And the first thing, the reaction is that, why me? Like, I'm not the only one who does this. There are these three more people who will kind of work on this. So there is a lot of this hesitation, which is there. So, typically, a lot of that could be, one, on account of various other reasons which we spoke earlier on. Awareness may be poor, or they don't know what really ERM is about. But I think a lot of it is about accountability itself. People are afraid to take this, accountability. Apart from their day jobs, they feel that this is something new which has come and landed on their table, which it clearly is not. But that's something which I've seen happen quite very often, and that's why I've mentioned accountability very, very clearly. Accountability has to be established. And another, the last one from my side over here is basically, this is a very cultural sort of problem which we have seen, is basically readiness to answer difficult questions. Everybody wants ERM also to be just like, a sweet sort of a document which talks of some typical risks, which you would probably find in every annual report. People avoid difficult conversations. For example, if you are talking, say in a promoter-driven company, a question like, what happens after the promoter is no more? Nobody even wants to think of this. Issues around ethics, people don't want to talk about it openly. We ask very blunt questions. What is your point of view on the ethics in an organization? Do you feel ethical standards are adequately communicated, followed in principle by people? Do you see any exceptions to it? People don't talk of it. This is a very, very difficult area, and I think probably needs a lot of tact as well, and a lot of push. And this is again something where tone at the top comes into play big time. Lack of culture of openness. Now, in an organization, if generally as well there is no culture of openness, where are people going to speak of risks very openly? Because risks are not things which have happened in the past, but risks are something which will happen in future as well. So if the as an organization the culture is to keep quiet, to adhere to what is being told or to comply with whatever directives are coming, people will not be able to freely talk of risks which they feel the organization might face. And this is a very critical aspect, I think. So the culture building is a very, very important area. Now, can we do something about it as risk specialists or service providers of ERM, or owners of the ERM programs? Only to a limited extent, but largely it's an organizational issue. I think this is where board again comes into play, and one has to really focus on this with a lot of priority. I have also seen cases where people do not admit to risks, loopholes within the organization. Somewhere, I think there is a fear, and maybe rightfully so, because invariably it is the internal auditors or the likes who come and do ERM exercises. That people somewhere feel that ERM is something like an audit in itself. So if they are admitting to any particular risk or a loophole or a problem, it might be held against them. And that again becomes an issue where people do not really admit to it, people do not speak of it very openly. So this is also something where for us a big lesson, that when we are also working on these sort of assignments, the hat that we wear should not be that of audit. We need to ensure that we are giving that comfort to the people. Communication from the board also helps in this sort of situation as well. So, in summary, I think that was pretty much it. I mean, these were the top 7 which I felt are the most commonly seen, pitfalls in an ERM exercise. Like I mentioned, there could be very many. There could be several, nuances to each of these. I may not have covered everything, but yeah, I mean, my attempt was to kind of just provoke some thoughts in your mind, to think on these lines, and make sure that whenever we are working on similar assignments in the future, we try to avoid these pitfalls as well. So with that, I'll kind of close my presentation, and now happy to take any questions from anybody.
While people are typing, Shreyas, one question from my side is, I've seen that generally ERM starts with the good presentation from some consultant, and people in a very enthusiastic manner start preparing risk registers, interviews, and all those things. But the pace and rhythm goes down in the following year and again in the next year.
Hmm.
So what are your inputs so that the function can be kept live as well as in a way embedded and not a separate siloed function?
Hmm, hmm, hmm. No, you're right, and I think that's something which we also see very, very often. I think one of the most important thing over here is, like I said, that firstly it's a continuous and ongoing process, and the executive management needs to be on top of it throughout. Which would mean that every sort of a business review that happens, there has to be this discussion on the risk. For example, any new project you are taking up, obviously a risk really comes into play, but how are we linking it all back to our ERM project? is very, very important. Does it get spoken enough in the organization on an ongoing basis is very important. Simple things like, now if you have identified 15 risk owners for 15 top risks, are there specific KPIs around this risk in built into their performance management? It's while it is theoretically supposed to be done, I don't know how many organizations actually end up doing that, right? So what happens is that people, unless they are living, breathing, and acknowledging ERM throughout the year, there's no way there's going to be the right steam in it, and it will end up being one or two people's headache just to make the presentation at the end of the year. So a holistic approach to ERM, a step-by-step approach to ERM is very, very important, and I think that's something. So the ERM project does not end with a board presentation. That's something which we have to keep in mind. For the first time ERM adopters, it's only after the board presentation that all the other steps of embedding those risks are defining the kind of MISs, KPIs, etc., is where the real work starts.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
So I think we have one question here.
Yeah. If you can read, then
Yeah.
you can go ahead. Actually.
Yeah. Usually, risk register is approved by board once in a year. Is this ERM a continuous process? What should ERM do day by day? Okay. So I think, see, risk register. So typically, boards review ERM half yearly or on an annual basis. Now, the Companies Act requires an annual review, but generally, in my experience, risk committees do convene at least twice a year. It doesn't happen only at the year end. A risk register is also a dynamic document. While the board may approve it once a year, does not mean that it is static for until the next review. The risk officer who is appointed for the job needs to continuously evaluate the organization's operations. Risk officer has to have a seat at the table at all the critical meetings that are happening, your executive committee meetings, your important decisions that are being taken, so that they can take away any critical risk events which they foresee, or if they believe something is coming up which needs to be a part of the risk register, they have to do it. It is in fact unfortunate that it gets treated like this, that it's only year to year that things get updated. And that was something which I said in my very first slide, that if it is getting treated as a compliance issue, obviously you're going to do it this way, but the idea is not to treat it as a compliance issue. Now, coming to the second part of your question, what should ERM do on a day by day basis? Of course, now this question is not very easy to answer, in the sense, because it depends on what ERM structure the company has really put up. If there is a separate ERM team, then pretty much their job is to really monitor the risks on an ongoing basis using various data analytical tools, external sources of what's really happening, what are the new risks emerging in the sector, what are the risk indicators, how are the risk indicators performing in the company in itself, right? So that's the kind of reports that they would do, and they would churn out to the risk committee or the risk owners on a day-to-day basis. That's typically what they would do. But many organizations do not have a very elaborate ERM team per se. There's only a risk officer. Then obviously the work then is limited to that extent. Then they only kind of look at the key risks around the board meeting time, and they would kind of update the presentation with whatever is the current status of the risk. But my point of view here is that this is not the best practice. This in fact is an indicator that ERM is not being fully deployed well, if what you have mentioned is the way it is being done.
Shreyas, before you move to next question, there is one. There are two questions in the chat box. So
Yeah.
if you can go through that.
Yes, this question I can see is what are the pitfalls in designing ERM framework? Well, I guess the ones which I spoke of are obviously the pitfalls in designing the ERM framework. But I think I'll apart from the ones which I spoke of, there are a couple of things which I would definitely put out over here is one, overcomplicating. I think in my view that's the biggest problem in ERM frameworks. We need to keep it very very simple. Okay, OSO framework requires a lot of detailing. Now I have seen certain risk registers which have gone to the extent of clearly articulating which principle also applies to a particular risk statement, and you need not really go to that level of complication as well, for the simple reason that you are focusing all your energies on creating the fantastic formats but not really working on the risks in them in that case, right? So that is my first sort of response. Over complicating is something which can happen in this case. And then I think not creating right enablers, not creating right reporting structures around ERM is the second biggest pitfall. See, risk registers I think are fairly well understood. There isn't any major gap over there. Risk rating also to a great extent it is understood quite well. People do it with a decent amount of understanding and accuracy as well. Yes, of course there are certain new concepts like you now suddenly like last couple of years velocity has gotten added. Earlier we were only doing probability and impact. Now it is probability, impact, and velocity. I think that's fairly very well done. So once the risk has been identified, once it has been rated, then what I think is a bigger pitfall. Most of the projects stop at that, and that's what I was earlier also mentioning, that that's when really the work starts. Now I have a particular risk. These are the mitigation plans. How do I align this with my day-to-day operations? Which are the processes which feed into this particular risk? How do the indicators emanate? Where are they going to emanate? What are the data points in the organization which I need to look out for? I think nobody gets into that level of detail. That I think is the second most important pitfall. And the last one would be around the risk identification. I would reiterate that I think risk identification is a fairly subjective and a judgmental process. So you need somebody strong, mature, with a good enough understanding to be moderating those discussions, so that your initial risk identification is relevant. I think I have seen that sometimes if that doesn't happen, the conversations can go all over the place, and you can have meeting after meeting without much sort of value addition. So that's I think probably the three ones which I will leave apart from the ones I spoke of. How to put together a top down and long term company level macro strategic risk analysis and mitigation framework. Wow, that's a how to detail point number one at business unit and organizational level. Okay, I think the first point, how to pull together a top-down and long-term company level macro and strategic risk analysis. Yeah, well, it's a long answer. Honestly, I can't possibly give you the full answer on this forum, but broadly, I'll tell you how this works, or at least the way I have kind of seen it work. Is you start with the vision and mission statement of the company to begin with when you are talking of a top down this thing approach, because strategies will change every 1 or 2 years, but the vision and mission of the company has to remain static. You cannot have an organization behaving in a different way where a vision statement says something else. So for example, I'm just throwing a very random example. Maybe a vision statement of a company says that we are a very very socially responsible organization who are going to put in the best manufacturing practices in an environmental friendly way. Now this is my mission statement or vision statement of the organization. Then I cannot have I cannot entirely forget the whole environmentally responsible part from my ERM. It has to be there. That is my vision. I would start at that level. Then second step is a strategy. Strategy is more something which changes maybe every couple of years depending on economic situations and all of that. So then what is my strategy? My strategy could be that I want to be the number 2 player in the global and number 1 player in India, for this particular service or sector or something of that sort. I will enter XYZ markets, or I will do this. Okay, now these are maybe the strategies. Now you have to start building risks around these strategies. What is it that's really going to stop me from achieving those objectives? And then you kind of further start breaking it down. Now, how do you, sort of make a long-term, strategic risk analysis? You can't really do a very, very long-term thing, I think, because everything beyond in today's time, probably even a year is long-term enough. You can't really be sitting and spending time on what may happen 5 years later or 10 years later. ERM is predictive in nature, but it is not about prediction. We are not here to sit and, we don't have crystal balls where you're going to predict what's going to happen. We just want to make sure that in the near future, at least the way we are going, there shouldn't be any major impediment. So I think long term is subjective. If you are thinking anything beyond 2 years, I would say revisit. Are you really then looking at, a long term project because it's already there, or you are talking of something more, than that? Think about it. uh, and I think mitigation framework again really depends on how you are, defining those risks. Very difficult to articulate right now here. If you have anything specific, I could maybe help you with that, or we could connect offline for this. And the second point, how to detail point number one at business unit and organizational level. See, I would go a little very about business unit level in the ERM in itself. That why is it, that a business unit is becoming very, very important from an ERM point of view? Unless that business unit is a very, very critical element of my strategy, everything from an ERM need not boil down or trickle down to a business unit level per se. Through processes and all of that, yes, it will obviously, but broadly you need not necessarily go down to that level, is my initial, first response. And organization level, again, I'm not very clear what you mean by that, because ERM is at an organizational level, so I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you could clarify, I could maybe help you better. Now coming to the other
There is,
question.
there is one interesting question. Should I and ERM department be headed by the same person or same lead?
uh, Actually, that's what happens most of the times. But the answer is, actually no. They should not be, led by the same person. It's my personal view. Though I see this happening more often than not everywhere. Being an internal audit, I myself have worked on so many ERM engagements. See, internal audit can feed into the ERM project. Internal audit can feed into an ERM project by, helping them monitor the risks, or by feeding them with, potential risks in the organization. But essentially, that distinction between ERM and audit should be maintained, is what I feel, for the very simple reason that the objectives of both are very different.
Yeah, we can take one more question.
I should.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, there was one question on which framework is to be good for implementation. Is it COSO or ISO 31000?
See, I am comfortable with COSO, so I'm biased towards COSO. Okay. So again, I'm not really, yeah, it's a very complicated discussion to compare those both, honestly, and I don't even know why I'll prefer a COSO thing. It's maybe sheerly because there is enough and more precedence to COSO. There is more comparatively because majority of the organizations I have worked with have implemented COSO frameworks, and that's the reason I personally prefer COSO framework.
Yeah, that is one. And what I feel is the way strategy enablement over and above the negative tone of risk management is put now in the COSO framework, uh, the level of details about all these things that is relevant in COSO than ISO 31000. That's what my personal view
Yeah.
is.
And again, I'll also, leave this one thought that, see, these frameworks at the end of the day are for us to help us basically create that framework to make it more demonstrable and all of that, right? I mean, in any case, we should not really get bogged down by the technicalities of the framework as long as the objectives are being achieved. I'm not saying throw away the methodologies out of the window. Use them as guidance, follow them to the extent it is practical, but don't get too bogged down by the frameworks. At the end of the day, the objective is a very simple objective, that I should be prepared for any potential threat to my organization.